Hi, welcome to Film Recommendations. Today we have Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1, King's Speech, and Green Lantern Emerald Knights. Talk about movies with you. Talk about movies with you. We'll learn about behind the scenes and deeper meanings, 'cause this is just a film review. So the first movie up is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. Now I'll also be talking about Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, because really they're one movie, simply split into two parts. I feel that it was well handled, having read Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows in a matter of days, literally less than a week. Actually, almost 4 years ago to the day. Anyway, so in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Harry and his friends have all of their adventures and all of the mysteries that have yet to be answered about the magical world and all of the characters in it answered. So, I don't want to spoil it too much because I think that they did a wonderful job adapting the book to film. In the case of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, I actually shelled out money for it to see it in IMAX 3D, and it was a waste of money. It honestly wouldn't have done anything less for me had I seen it in just regular two-dimensional format, or in even just regular 3D format. The IMAX screen that they had it on was just a very tall screen, so it had the same aspect ratio as a normal television, which I thought was kind of lame. Anyway, for the actual movie itself, 3D doesn't do a whole lot. I realize that that television production companies, manufacturers, are actually pushing 3D television as a new way to experience movies. I actually saw a preview with some of the characters of Open Season, that really bad DreamWorks computer animated movie about the animals in the woods, advertising a 3D television, and it was really bad. But that aside, I would say it completed the series very nicely, and they are talking about adding more to it. But I think I think it's a little bit sad that it went in such a different direction from where the first movie started out, where everything was very medieval looking, and even up through Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, you had uh, a very medieval feel to Hogwarts and the adventures. As soon as they reached, um, I want to say it was Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, they started giving it a much more modern feel, and a little bit less fairy tale-ish. Um, and I will say that that works because in the world of Harry Potter, the magic is not meant to make it pure fantasy. It is meant to say that magic in the real world is uh, is kind of something that we in the Muggle world have learned to do without. So, um, it's just strange when they start, dressing in normal street clothes uh, instead of like 18th century, 19th century clothing, and you start to realize that that they are in our world, living as we're doing everything. Uh, and of course this is all just fantasy, but the point is that they they try and make the Muggle world as much like our own world and our reality as they can, using real places um, and just making it as if they literally dropped right out of the sky into um, into our reality. So I thought that was rather cool. Of course, Emma Watson is great in it, and Rupert Grint. Although a lot of people don't think that he's a very good actor, I think that Rupert Grint is actually very good in this part, which of course he's been playing since he was a kid. But uh, I think he just stands out among the trio. Harry Potter, uh, the actor who plays him, of course, just kind of says the lines, does the part. I wouldn't exactly call him a great actor. I mean, obviously they've had acting coaches since they started the film franchise. I would say that of the movies, this one pays the most respect to all of the ins and outs and twists along the way that you encounter in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Um, they divide it at a good point too, where you still have plenty of suspense and excitement about the story. So you're still wondering, well, what's going to happen next? And they took a little bit of free license with the narration because, of course, in the book, um, things happen in chapters. So you don't have simultaneous action going on um, with a lot of it. You have one thing happens, then another thing happens elsewhere along the way. So anyway, uh, so I feel that I'm rather sad to see the film series come to a close, but I was much sadder to see the book series come to a close. And at the same time, I read the book about 4 years ago now, uh, and actually exactly 4 years ago. So for me, this is a movie that I've been waiting 4 years to see, and I was very, very, very disappointed with the direction that they took Goblet of Fire, to be honest. Um, I liked the way they took a lot of it, but Goblet of Fire turned into this teen soap opera and became um, this big Horkin deal, and felt like it was trying to be too much like the other three movies, but more mature, if that makes sense. Anyway, so I think uh, that they got it a little bit more on the nose with Order of the Phoenix, and of course, um, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince is my favorite book, so I'm not sure if they did it justice still. Um, I I did watch it once, and I thought it was good. I thought, of course, Alan Rickman did the typical excellent job that he does. Um, but yeah, the thing about the Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows is that it actually emphasizes the mystery solving elements of the story, and that's one of the best things I like about the Harry Potter book series is the mystery element, where you have to figure out the clues and guess at different things. And it's all there if you try and figure it out, especially if you go back to the first books. There are clues there right along the way that Rowling put in. So that's one of the nice things about the books. In terms of the movie, they actually do a good job of giving you some of uh, the clues and the logic, but really, in the end, it's nowhere near as much as you would get from the book. So uh, that's the first recommendation for this episode: Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, both parts 1 and 2. The next film is Green Lantern Emerald Knights. Now, this was made as kind of a promotional film building up for the release of the Green Lantern movie. But it's hard to say whether it actually stands out on its own. It has Hal Jordan as the Green Lantern, uh, but he's voiced by Nathan Fillion, more famous now in the ABC series Castle, and before that as Captain Hammer in Dr. Horrible's Sing-Along blog, and before that as Malcolm Reynolds, star character of the television series Firefly. Anyway, uh, and there are a slew of other celebrities who did the voices, so it was rather cool. Um, I actually rented these from Blockbuster Express as opposed to Redbox because there are a couple of Blockbuster Express vending machines nearer to where I live, so it made more sense to rent from there. Uh, and because there were two of them and they charged the same price as Redbox per night, it seemed like a good enough deal. Um, Also, they had a little bit of a deal for August where if you type in the promo code August movie, you can rent three and get the third one for free. Basically, they take $1 off. It's not very much of a good deal, but it's better than nothing. Anyway, um, uh, Emerald Knights is really just like a series of different little vignette episodes from other Green Lantern stories and adapts them to uh, adapts them to uh, the overarching story of uh, of something that I actually read, which was the destruction of Oa and the use uh, of the of the Green Lantern planet Mogo as temporary base for the Green Lanterns while they rebuilt Oa. Um, of, of course, in the actual comic book, Mogo was, a legend of like, the most powerful Green Lantern ever, um, and it just ended up being a little bit not quite what it needed to be in order to kind of tell the story of Mogo. But what was kind of cool was that they told the story of how Kilowog um, got through training and became, the toughest Green Lantern there, and like, the one that projects the most meanness and everything. And it just told some interesting stories. So I thought that was kind of cool. As it is, uh, it was clearly kind of made for kids. The animation style that DC and Warner Brothers have kind of decided on is very is very much like Disney in its style, um, but at the same time different enough that it can at least tell the stories. It had a preview of All-Star Superman, and I was very disappointed at the style that this film, Emerald Knights, and All-Star Superman kind of had in common. Uh, they 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 give the character, a very uh, full. They give all the characters very full lips, all the human characters anyway, and it's just overly stylized, um, so that you can't really as easily tell one character from another. Whereas in Superman the Animated Series and Justice League, for instance, where they kind of kept the same style of drawing the characters so that you could identify one from the other, they ended up producing an excellent series where you could tell one character from another. And the same goes for Batman the Animated Series. You could identify one character from another. Although they did change styles between
um, between the first series of Batman in the 90s, which was Batman the Animated Series, and then later The Adventures of Batman and Robin, when it changed from Fox to Kids WB. And they tried to have it done by the same uh, style as Superman with fewer lines drawn. Uh, I mean, by contrast, if you look at Batman Gotham Knight, you still have uh, you have a bit more of an artistic style, but you still have um, a well done series of stories. So I can't say that the two are really comparable, except that you have the same format, and it would just be good if they uh, went ahead and kept that kind of style where each story maybe is drawn a little differently. Um, like maybe like maybe you can imagine if Kilowog was telling it, it would be much more rough looking and scary and everything. So I don't know. It's just one of those notions that I have about this. So uh, in in terms of animation style, storytelling, uh, too much distraction from uh, from the actual stories. Emerald Knights is good, but it's not great. I'd give it a 3.5 out of 5 for the final product. Um, Again, it's going to be more for kids. Uh, the way that they designed it, it's really um, not a story that is like with Batman Gotham Knight, where some of it is a bit more adult and everything. So um, I think teenagers might get into it. Maybe people in their late teens, early 20s who, are fans of comic books or whatever. But as a standalone piece, I don't think it really holds together. And lastly, for uh, for this episode, is The King's Speech, a story a little bit close to my heart about someone who stammers, whereas I simply lose my train of thought and go, uh, see? Anyway, The King's Speech, most people have seen it by now. I hadn't, and I'm guessing a lot of you out there hadn't. The King's Speech is excellent, though. Oh, I should mention that uh, that Green Lantern Emerald Knights comes with a few features, but it's really just sneak peeks at other Warner Brothers DC projects, which um, you know I've seen in the past with Wonder Woman, her animated movie, and uh, the Superman animated movies, and uh, so forth. And it's a little bit disappointing that they can't give you a little behind the scenes look at the voice actors and such. With this one, they give you a sneak peek of Batman Year One, which is being produced based exclusively on the comic book of the same name, and they try and copy that Frank Miller style. And for those of you who don't know, Frank Miller created Spawn and gave gave Batman in the book Batman the Year One a very unique style. So I'll be looking forward to watching that and giving you a review. It'll probably be positive. It's hard to tell. From the animation style, it looks like it may be more of an animated comic format. Anyway, The King's Speech is it seems to be based on a true story. It's hard to tell whether they're taking certain historical liberties, but essentially what it talks about is how King George VI uh, ended up on the throne of England, well, Britain, even though he isn't the firstborn, and you know, the story of how he overcame his stammering, which is interesting because it takes a look at the psychological elements of stammering, uh, how they punished him until he would stop using his left hand as his dominant hand, how they made fun of him for his stammering once he did, and how they made him wear leg braces to compensate for the fact that he tended to, bend his knees together um, when he stood. So it ends up a very good film. But what's more interesting is kind of the human story to it about um, this man, his wife and children, his family, and his budding friendship with Geoffrey Rush, who plays a magnificent role and ends up becoming a real standout character. Then again, he basically plays the second male lead in this film. So altogether, it's an excellent movie, and and I love the fact that they really brought the world of 1930s uh, British society to life. Uh, the angles and the movements of the angles or lack thereof do wonders for telling the story, so that, for instance, when when Albert, which is the character's first name, when he's giving a speech and he starts to stammer, and he has to stop because he simply can't get it out. The zoom is very tight on his face, so that you realize everybody's focused on him, and uh, he feels very, like everybody is right there up in his face. So it's a wonderful use of camera angles. I noticed that they use a fisheye lens for some of the scenes to really capture the full span of everything. But then at the same time, when a speech is being delivered over the radio, they show all the people around the British Empire listening closely to what the king is saying. And they just did an amazing job of making this movie. Um, as I said, I don't know if it's true about everything involving the king stammering, but it isn't unrealistic. And what I like about it is that it shows that, these are human beings who have to be more than human in order to do the job that they do. And it's generally just a great film for showing that a person like that, who is prepared all their life to project an air of perfection, can be totally messed up by it. If he were allowed to use his left hand, for instance, it would have been fine. But they also talk about his nanny, who would um, who, when he would be presented to his parents once a day, would pinch him so that he would start to cry, so that then she could take him off elsewhere, and then wouldn't feed him. This is someone who's obviously, like, very little, and would just lay him down in bed and not feed him and stuff, because apparently she liked uh, his older brother more, and it's, that kind of child abuse. And apparently they didn't notice for weeks, or not weeks, years. Took them like 2 or 3 years, I guess, where they just noticed that he was incredibly skinny. But also, it's fun to hear the doctors talk about what makes him stammer and what will cure him, and how much nonsense it is. Like, they tell him smoking opens up the larynx and relaxes you and makes it easier for you to speak without stammering. And of course, that's not really true. That's just a whole other effect, you know, and it's not really going to help with his stammering at all. He'll just stammer with a lower voice. Only it'll sound like this. Anyway, so um, they shove marbles into his mouth, which is really a tactic for improving pronunciation, not stammering. Uh, you know, and it's interesting because then Geoffrey Rush, his character of Lionel, comes in and does these tricks that actors do, because his character is an actor playing an actor. Why isn't that in my Inception review? Uh, anyway, he does these tricks that actors do that help with the mechanical aspects of stammering. And it works for a time, but not really until they deal with some of the psychological stuff. Uh, People looking at him. And just talking about, you know, the fact that his father was very intimidating and wanted to be intimidating. Um, and the fact that his brothers made fun of him and everything. So he was, put upon by uh, by this family, and then put upon by the institution of royalty to be this figure. He he deals with the psychological issues in time, but then the climactic scene occurs when they're at Westminster Abbey. And I had seen this scene previously, but not in context, so I didn't know what was building up to it. And what happens is Geoffrey Rush kind of antagonizes him, because all the while, whenever Albert was angry, he would no longer stammer, and whenever he sings, he no longer stammers, and uh, whenever he's distracted by something else and fixated on that, he doesn't stammer. But when he thinks about who he's talking to, all that stuff, and that can easily be the cause of a lot of problems for when you have to perform. It's performance anxiety, and but it goes deeper with the character. So anyway, he antagonizes him a few times to try and get him to, fixate on something else so that he doesn't stop and not know what to say next. And because what happens is his mind gets locked, and it's a psychological problem with anxiety. Anyway, so what he does is Geoffrey Rush's character Lionel sits in uh, the coronation chair, uh, the actual throne of in Westminster Abbey, under which sits a rock, which was supposedly, I believe, the stone that King Arthur pulled the sword out of, and it's Saint Edward's chair, and it's an and it looks, like, a little bit like an unassuming chair, and at the same time like a very important chair, given where it's placed. So what's amazing just about that is that this character would have the audacity, but it at the same time is what fixes Albert and gets him the rage that he needs, this self-righteous indignation on behalf of his family's station in society, that he can finally come forth as a lion. And the most wonderful line that is delivered is after he asks, "What are you doing?" And Geoffrey Rush spends the next minute or so questioning, well, you said you don't want to be king. What manner of chair is this? People have carved their names into it. It's held in place by a stone. It's not really a very special chair at all. and and the guy's like, "Get out of it." And he's like, "Why should I listen to you? You don't want to be king." And Albert says, "By divine right, if you must. I am the king." And he's like, "I will be heard. I have a voice." And he says it, loud and proud like a lion, the English lion, roaring over uh, the empty Westminster Abbey. And Geoffrey Rush just looks at him as a friend might and says, "Yes, yes, you do." And it's just this amazing, powerful scene. You can look it up on YouTube, the King's Speech. It's one that I watched a couple of times in a class to kind of show natural speech uh, demonstrated in film a little bit more. And the enunciation that they use is very practiced, but at the same time they do use a sort of uh, unnatural or more natural, I should say, pace where you can't purely understand him uh, unless you listen to him. Like when Albert says, "What are you doing?" Just you can't even hear the syllables in that. The most you can hear is the word "doing" because that's held onto the longest as the most important word of that particular sentence. And as a linguist, this is kind of something that I've had to study. So anyway, uh, the King's Speech, the DVD comes. That is not the King's Speech. The King's Speech DVD that I got from Blockbuster comes with all these extras. And of course, Helena Bonham Carter plays a wonderful role in this, and I think she should have gotten an award for it if she didn't. But anyway, um, the film is excellent. It just stands out. But it comes with excellent features such as a director commentary, which I haven't gotten to listen to yet. But it also comes with some behind-the-scenes featurettes, and just an amazing look at some of the things going into making the film. So I'm going to watch that, and I'm sure that I'm in for a treat with the full-length director commentary. So I'm going to watch that after I get things done for the day, and I will see you next time on Film Recommendations. Bye-bye.